So about now you're probably thinking, what about the buildings? Are we ever going to do them? Well, yes we are. We're going to do them in this video. And it may look quite daunting, but these are relatively easy to paint, especially if you go for the very grotty, used, grungy, oily effect that I've gone for here. Right, so let's get started. Here's a sprue of building pieces, and we take our clippers here and carefully unclip the pieces from the sprue. Like so. Now you're going to be left with little bits of nubbins on there where you cut it, and the easiest way to get rid of that is to take your scalpel, being careful not to cut yourself as usual, and just, where are we? Just slice off those extra bits, keeping your fingers out of the way. So it's nice and smooth. Alternatively, you can use a small file like this and file down those bits. Do that all around, and then you'll be ready to start clipping them together. Okay, I have two pieces here that I want to attach like so. So I take two clips. Now when I cut these off the sprue, I also clean them a little bit so little bits weren't sticking out. And we put them into a piece like that. And like that. Now I was lucky with those two, they both clipped in nice and smoothly and easily. That won't always happen, however. You may have to get the end of a scalpel and just clean around the inside of a hole. There's a tiny little mould line in there which may stop it going together. And you may also have to use some tool to clip them together. So if I attach this to here, I might use the end of a file just to push that down, and there it goes, click. There we go. I was quite lucky with those two, they went in quite smoothly, but you may have to clean off bits of flash and fiddle around a bit. So there's two pieces attached. Now what you want to do is make a number of structures which you can mix and match during the game. You can, if you wish, paint all these bits separately and take them apart every time, but I think you'll have great difficulties doing that. Because of the way this is designed, it can be difficult to take them apart again. It's just very, very difficult. It's not quite as modular as they advertise. So what you should do is put together a nice series of modular pieces. So, for example, here's a tower structure. And this is a great generic tower which I can use in any game. Here's another building structure. So we'll use this building as our example piece and paint this one up. I'm going to take off the door because I think I'll do that separately so I can still clip that back in if I need to. I'm going to reinforce its strength by making sure those little clips stay in place, and I do this by squirting some super glue around the plug and into the gaps. Now I could have super glued this as I built it, but I wanted to experiment with what I was building, and it's just easier now to do it after the fact. That'll give it a little bit of extra strength. And once the super glue is dry, I'll take this outside and spray the entire thing with black primer. And here's our building undercoated in black, just normal black primer spray all over. That gives us a nice good base on which to put the following coats. The next thing I'm going to do with this building is spray it with grey spray paint. And I have here some Tamiya colour. This is gunship grey. You can choose any grey colour you want to, dark or light, it depends on the final effect you're trying to achieve. Now, this technique is stolen wholesale from the Mantic Games website, and I found it works really well for these buildings. It's fast and easy. What you do is spray this from a further back distance than normal. So usually you'd be spraying from about this distance, so go back a little bit further and go small puffs of paint from a distance, and just working around the building from the top-down angle, like so. And what this will do is give it a nice grey coverage, but also keep some of the black in the areas where it would be shadowed and near the bottom of the building. In the middle, you just need to give it a few quick sprays, because I'm not going to bother detailing the insides of the building. I'm just going to make them pretty much dark grey. So I'm going to do that grey phase and come back in a moment. There we are, I've sprayed that grey. Now I notice a bit of residue has been left there by the super glue I used to glue in the clips, so keep that in mind. I don't mind, I want these to look grimy and grotty, so that doesn't bother me at all, but when you put yours together you may want to glue the clips as you go. But we'll put on the grey, and as you can see, it's a nice transition there from the grey, just a shading of the black there down the bottom, but the most is on the top. Now the next thing I'm going to do is give it a coat of white, some white primer, and I'm going to spray it in the same way, that same method, just a little puff from a distance, working from the top down. I'm back, and here's our finished base coat. You can see the spraying of the paint from a distance and in little bursts has given us that nice speckly texture to the paint. Makes it look a bit more interesting. It's not a completely smooth coat. And we've got a bit of artificial shadowing and highlighting going on because we sprayed at an angle from the top. Now the next thing I'm going to do is paint on some detail so we get a bit of variation in this plain grey white colour. I'm going to make this pole down here a metallic colour. I'll probably go a colour or maybe a metal, I'm not sure, around the door area. Might bring out a few of these little spots in yellow, maybe the rest of this metal, just to give it some variation. You can go to town on this kind of thing. I've seen ones with big arrow patterns on the roof and sides and things like that. You could even use letraset letters to put numbers and letters on the side, or paint them yourself. Do whatever you want. Go to town, look on the internet for inspiration. There we go, a bit of detailing. Got a metallic finish around the door, bit of metal there, bit of yellow highlights. Very, very simple. Now I accidentally skipped this phase with the other building because I was so eager to get onto the washing phase. But give this a little bit of a dry brush highlight before you do your washes by taking some white on a big brush and then just wiping off most of the paint. So there's only a little bit left. And then just run it over your building so you've got a top-down highlight. You can see that just gives it a bit more edge highlighting. And you can see it's very subtle, but it's worth doing. Right, now let's move on to the washes. So the next step is to add some washes, some dirt and grime to this building to make it look really lived in. Here's when you can start getting a bit creative. I've got some different shades of wash here, some black, dark brown, lighter brown, bit of army painter strong tone, and with these washes I'm going to start splashing it all over the building to give it a worn, lived in look, rain streaks, rust streaks, that kind of thing. So let's take our building, mix up some ink using a large, slightly old brush for this, and let's get some ink, or wash I should say, and start splashing it on. Now as you go, use your finger to rub it in, or use a paper towel to dab it off. Just go with the flow. The other thing you can do is drip heavy bits from bits where rain would come falling down. It really looks like built up grime and rain and oil and that kind of thing. Especially over these metallic areas which would get oily. Mix a nice lot of water into your wash so it flows nicely. Now you're probably thinking, what a mess! What's he doing? But trust me, this will work. Of course, if you're going for a very clean sci-fi look, this is totally inappropriate. The good thing about this kind of thing is you can do whatever you want. You could go for bright colours if you wanted to. You could have bright red and blue buildings. There are really no rules. Bring that into the gap. This is sort of splodges where people with dirty boots have walked. Define those joints there. Now I'm using a bit of a lighter brown around these yellow areas and everywhere else, more towards the base where grime is built up. Splodge. Right, now if I get a smaller brush and get some of that light brown, I can also dribble down from some of these areas where there would be runoff, like so. This is your brown, rusty runoff. And I'll let that dry and then go through and do a bit more detailed work, especially this kind of grotty oil runoff. Now you can, if you wish, do this highlighting phase after you've put the washes on. I've just gone back to this building and done a bit of highlighting there and it looks quite good. You can see just on the edge of the yellow. So really, highlights before or after washes. They give you a different effect. Just experiment and see which one you prefer. Here I can use a small brush to do some little dribbles. Oops. Just using the tip of the brush. For the next step, I'm using Vallejo pigments, in this case burnt umber. You can use different colours if you like. And this is a powder which you can mix with water or you can use dry. It gives a wonderful realistic effect. Now as you can see, I'm making my buildings quite grotty and grimy and well used. It's up to you how much you do of this kind of thing. You can keep them absolutely clean, hard sci-fi clean if you like. So I get this pigment stuff. Start rubbing it around the areas at the very bottom where it would be meeting the ground. And you can see the nice dirty grimy effect it gives you down the bottom of the building. Now I've got one more tricky thing to do and this will be finished. And this is a simple paint chipping technique. You take a grey colour and you take a piece of foam. This is from a figure pack. So get your bit of foam, dab it into the paint and get most of it off, a bit like you would with dry brushing. And then you can just dab this on places where the paint would be chipped. As you can see, it gives a nice, simple chip paint effect. Corners, edges of tiles. There we go. Really simple, really effective. That's it from me, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this series on Deadzone. As you can see, the final result looks pretty good on the table. But remember, it's your game. Paint them any way you like. And whatever you do, keep enjoying playing with toy soldiers. Oh, oh.